Fellas, on today's content we are wrapping up the misadventures of a dual void battery Badge of the Brotherhood Stormbrand assassin. And to be quite honest, I am very happy to conclude this character's journey. It achieved success by defeating Sirus on Awakener 8 and Maven, deathlessly. And relatively fast too, which is another great thing about the build, but you'll see that throughout the video. Granted, some changes had to be made in order to tackle endgame content smoothly. This involves forking a bit more currency into the build, mainly because this is a relatively normie setup, but as you'll see from the gameplay, I think that it's more than justifiable. Having said that, there are some quirks to this character. Besides living to the mantra of just don't get hit bro, during single target this build has a quote-unquote ramp up. We gotta build up inspiration, frenzy and power charges in order to deal the most damage. However, I gotta say that Hydrosphere is doing some work in the background. I am not 100% sure as to what the hell is going on between Hydrosphere and Stormbrand, but besides applying the exposure to enemies, this little combination is making enemies go poof. Which brings me to the final point in this intro. PoE claims that the character's DPS is like 6.8 million while fully buffed. You know, things like the Val skills, all power charges, all frenzies, unnerving the enemy, on consecrated ground, shocked, etc. But I gotta say, in practice, this feels like it's doing even more than that number. But without spoiling more of this character, hey, if you are new around here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, otherwise a rating and a comment are always appreciated. And with that said, let's talk about brands, specifically electrifying Sumer brands. Alright everyone, it's gear time, and I am doing this again because there have been some changes to the gear that the character uses. Important ones to consider that will spike the overall investment to the character. For example, the ones, 2 void batteries with as much crit chance and cast speed, but also damage penetrates elemental resistances as the implicit. Mandatory change in comparison to the previous video, especially if you plan to tackle endgame content. The helmet is now an Awakener Orb Slam successful gamble. We've got an extra power charge from Warlord influence, and nearby enemies take 6% increased elemental damage, which is a Shaper modifier. The helmet also rolled a chunky bit of life, and it has elemental weakness curse effect as the enchantment. Everything but the enchantment is mandatory, as Stormbrand damage or Hydrosphere exposure are better options to have. I also recrafted my own slot on hit ring. By using Essences of Scorn, you can force crit multi on rings, and I did this until I hit a decent amount of life and resistances, also negative mana cost crafted on it, because I changed the Watcher's Eye, but we'll get there in a bit. The belt got some Aisling on Veils added into it. This allowed me to get fire and chaos resistance naturally, and also use an open prefix to benchcraft increased damage. Finally, I got a better Call of the Brotherhood just to get a little bit more damage out of it. And that should be all the changes. So just to quickly go over the rest of the gear, the gloves are Command of the Pit, with elemental weakness on hit as the corrupted implicit. We use these gloves to trigger Arcane Surge for free when we hit an enemy with spell damage. The Abyss Jewel on the gloves has life, crit multi and cast speed if you've dealt a crit recently. The Abyss Jewel on the belt has crit multi and resistances. The boots have life, movement speed, resistances and chance to avoid elemental ailments. The amulet is Badge of the Brotherhood, for the elusive effect and equal amounts of power and frenzy charges. It also has crystal skin anointed on it, for more resistances and elemental ailment avoidance chance. And the body armor is another Awakener Orb Slam successful gamble, with life, chance to gain a frenzy on hit from Redeemer influence and spell crit from Shaper influence. Also more elemental ailment avoidance crafted on it, which in total makes us immune to shock, chill, freeze and ignite. And for flasks, a quartz, a wise oak and a Series promise. For the wise oak, make sure that both lightning and cold res are equally balanced, so that you can penetrate both resistances when wise oak is up. But yeah, that is it for the gear. It is going to be a bit of an expensive investment, but it is required since we are trying to min-max a lot of things about this character. Also, chaos resistance is mandatory anywhere and everywhere you can get it, which is going to make gearing a bit harder, so do keep that in mind. And with all of that said, let's talk about the skill tree. Alright, so this is now a level 95 assassin. We sided with Alira from the beginning for resistances and crit multi. For Pantheons, Solaris has become my best friend for these questionably defended builds, but for the lesser one we swap between Shakari and Averath. I said Tukohama on the previous video, but I meant Averath. Anyways, for the Ascendancy, Power Charge Generation, Power Charge Crit stuff, Elusive on Crit and Single Target DPS. Simple stuff. Now for the skill tree itself, this is pretty much the same tree as the last time. But now we've got a brand cluster jewel added into the mix. This medium cluster has 5 passives at most, with grand design and brand loyalty to deal even more branded damage. which is a nice addition to this character. The Watcher's Eye was also changed. It is now giving us crit multi while affected by precision and damage against enemies on consecrated ground while affected by zealotry. But lining damage with Wrath, especially at the highest roll, is going to outgun the zealotry modifier, up to you and your budget. I also changed some regular jewels to get a bit more life and resistances, especially Lightning and Call to trigger the Wise Soak damage bonus. Overall, the focus remains on this: increased maximum life, a chunky crit multi modifier, and anything else that you may like. Resistances, damage, quality of life, etc. But from there on out, everything else remains the same. Yes, we did not take the dodge notes and instead grabbed Elusive Effect. A bit of a questionable decision, but due to the route we take on the tree, either we sacrifice life to accommodate the dodge, or we take this route and get the most out of the points that we allocated. I chose the latter. We are focusing around the power charges on the tree, grabbing any life, crit multi, spell damage, or useful stuff around those power charge notables. It is a bit of a simple tree, if you take into consideration that this build rotates around the amount of power charges present, and any modifiers that help the damage granted from said charges. Hence why we really cannot cram dodge into this. We also need a large cluster jewel that has Doriani's Lesson and Prismatic Heart as the mandatory modifiers. The large cluster jewel also hosts the brand medium cluster, but also another cluster jewel for cursed enemies. One of these nodes, Master of Fear, is going to unnerve enemies on spell hit. It is a massive DPS gain for this character and something that you simply cannot sleep on. Now yes, the only brand stuff is the medium cluster besides Rune Binder. I don't have a problem spamming the brands everywhere I go, but I know that some of you require your brand recalls and your brand notes. But this is how I built my character, and if you like, you can respec things here and there to accommodate those brand notes. But yeah, that is it for the skill tree. I won't explain things in depth because we saw this tree last time and not much changed. Level 95 is mandatory, so no half measures, okay? Anyways, let's talk about the gem setups now. Alright, so our skill setups are still the same as last time, but I've added a couple of extra level corrupted gems into the mix for a bit more damage. So in the body armor, a level 21 with 20 quality Storm brand, Hypothermia, Divergent Swift brand, Anomalous Inspiration, Awakened added lightning damage, and a level 21 and 20 quality Control Destruction. Anyways, in the helmet, Flame Dash and Decoy Totem, with both linked to Second Wind, and Decoy Totem also needs multiple totem support. Since we are using Rune Binder, we lost one maximum totem and multiple totem support overcomes that penalty. For auras we need Wrath and Zealotry at level 21, linked to Enlighten level 3 or 4. We also need Precision, you know, for the Watcher's Eye. We also need Hydrosphere linked to Cooling Strike. And in the offhand, Vaal Haste and Vaal Righteous Fire, with both of them linked to increased duration. But with all of that said, let's wrap up this character's journey. And I will admit that this is one hell of a just don't get hit bro build. We don't have enough strength to get flat armor gear, and evasion is kinda useless, especially against endgame bosses since most of them only use spells. Energy shield is okay, but at the end of the day it is not going to stop most damage. So I won't blame you if you want to point out that the defensive department on this character is borderline non-existent. However, he compensates with the damage and speed. I gotta say that I had a ton of fun playing with this character. Mapping was a breeze and the endgame bosses that I tackled melted away relatively fast, with my character living almost without a scratch, except during Shaper's fight where the beautiful server performance caused a lag spike before he died. Thank you Triple G, very cool. Snark aside, I think we all expected this character to achieve success, considering the investment that it required. While the build itself is a bit normie, since you know, dual void batteries, Badge of the Brotherhood and Call of the Brotherhood as an assassin isn't particularly groundbreaking, but at the end of the day it still went relatively smooth and I didn't have as much issues gearing up. Granted, RNG smiled upon the character in some aspects, but overall, as long as you've got the currency, you've got the build. Anyways, I leave you with Maven's fight. If you got to this point and you are new around here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, a rating and a comment are always appreciated. Thank you so much for watching the video. Take care and peace out.
Give in to grace!